from Team Leads Digital. Uh, I've got a very elite panel today. I've got Rajeshri from Rolls-Royce, and I've got Rohit from Cineworks. And Rajeshri and Rohit, we would like to discuss how the adoption of technology should be taken place within the IT industry. And before we start the discussion, I would like to introduce Rajeshri. Rajeshri had been part of Rolls-Royce. She's been heading the partnerships within the ecosystem of Rolls-Royce. Prior to that, she was with a lot of organizations like IBM, so far and so on. She's been working in multiple geographies. She worked a large stint in Singapore, basis our discussion we had. She had been also heading a lot of private partner relationship on the smart city space. She'd been working in the Prime Minister's office or in coordination with the Prime Minister's office and initiated a lot of smart city initiatives both in Singapore and worked directly with government of Singapore. Welcome on board, Rajeshri. I'm sorry if I missed anything. Welcome on board. Rohit, welcome you again. We just spoke, but let me give you an official introduction. Rohit comes with about 23 years of experience, also worked with multiple geographies. He worked in the Middle East, worked in Singapore, worked in organizations like HSBC, GE Money, Accenture, and had been handling talent acquisition, had been handling recruitment, employee engagement, training, and gamut of HR functions. So I welcome both of you for this wonderful webinar session of how technology adoption should take place within the IT industry. So my first question goes to Rajeshri, and both can answer this to me. How do you know how to encourage technology adoption for IT industry? So let's start with Rajeshri there.
Shiva, thank you so much for this opportunity, and good morning to you all. Thank you for having me once again. It's wonderful to share my thought leadership and what we need to do and how we need to look at anywhere. So that is the kind of scenario everybody's looking. And what they're also looking at is they're taking a stock check as to, are they prepared today to be able to, venture into this new normal? Do they have the infrastructure? Because working from home is not an easy thing, right? Yeah, I know I need to do my job, but it also poses a lot of different challenges. If I don't see, an example I'm giving you, see, in earlier thing, when you're in office, I can just walk to your desk, I can meet you in person, get things done. It's much faster. But here we're trying to follow up, schedule meetings. We have to access to somebody's calendar. And even when you're calling today, what happens is everybody has their own priorities, right? Define set priorities. And also when you work from home, you're also having other challenges. You have to tend to your family, so many different things. I'm not saying that's coming in your way, but the problem is you're dealing with too many things, and that oh, I need to call back. Sometimes you miss out, not because you're not doing that, because today we are not adept at it yet to be highly efficient. So I see sometimes there is lack of that efficiency when we are working in this kind of culture. So with that, how does technology enable to not make that as a challenge or pose that as a challenge? How does technology adoption mitigate all of that? How do we have seamless, whether you can work from anywhere, it doesn't matter, as long as you're getting your job done. How should it matter where you work, right?
So that also, because I know you've been spearheading a lot of the latest technologies. I will come back to you on this question, but for you to think through, especially on this SMAC, when I'm saying social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, which you've been anchoring, especially on the smart city side. But I'll give you a minute to think. Let's move on to Rohit. Rohit, what's your opinion? How do you think the industry should adopt the new technologies going forward?
See, so for me, I'm completely in alignment with what Rajeshri said. I think all of that is perfect. I'll just chime in to say that it's also about digital literacy and acceptance, right? I think for me, it starts somewhere there, where I've seen challenges, because we were thrown into this situation all of a sudden. Nobody expected this towards the middle of March, that the entire country will go into a clampdown. And I've seen that, at least in my organization, some of the folks who've been a little slow on, digital literacy, digital acceptance, I've had to work with them. I'll give you a simple example. I've been on very many Zoom calls, simple Zoom calls, where people even struggle to put on their videos, right? Where people are a little apprehensive. There's a lot of, anxiety about this kind of, using digital platforms to collaborate. I see that there's a workforce that is very comfortable with it, and I see that there's a workforce that still is anxious about it. So for me, it's about first, removing that anxiety, explain to people how this is so easy and practical to navigate. And I think it's about adopting, digital platforms. See, again, I'm using this as an example for the work from home, but if you move away from that, it's about, okay, how can I upskill myself, reskill? And I think that's a conversation we'll come to in the near future. So I don't want to get ahead of myself in thought process, but that's how I'm thinking. But I think in addition to what Rajshri said, digital literacy, digital acceptance, lots of leaders are struggling today. I won't quote the person, but I still know an ex-CEO I worked with who preferred to take printouts of a PPT and read it out as we were in the meeting. So, some of those habits, some of those things that people have cultivated over the years need to change. And as we work from home, even I've gone in my organization one step further to invite family members and make them digital literate, because it's very important for the family member, the parent, the uncle, the spouse, to be digitally literate, to understand what the employee is going through and to support the employee.
Okay, now that we've set the context, but I would like to really go back to the first question, Rajeshri, that I've asked. Which are the skills do you think that are going to play a very active role, especially on the digitalization side? Because everybody is talking about digital footprint, having a large or digitalization, a lot of projects, or moving their productivity tools. But which are the few skills that you think that will have an upbeat in the market in the coming days to come?
Most important, prime most, attitude, culture. Because look, adoption of technology is anyway going to happen. It is something that you can't stop. It is your attitude towards how do you embrace it, number one. Number two, like you also said that, like digital literacy. Literacy is, okay, look, we are entering this era of everything is going to go, whether you like it or not, the transformation is on. Now there's no stop button to it. It is not going to even, shift backwards. It is going to go so fast ahead that people will not realize what hit them. And today, if you look at even during the pandemic in the last 6 months, if you compare 2019 to where the technology advancements were and where it is today, it is skyrocketed. The paradigm shift has happened in this last 8 months itself, phenomenally. Whether it be AI, you take it in neural networks, neural link, in fact, what Elon Musk is doing, it is a breakthrough. People are creating some phenomenal stuff. Today, we're talking about one of Elon Musk's organization, SpaceLink, I think so. Sorry if I'm calling it.
SpaceX, yeah.
So not SpaceX, there's another organization which is doing where they're sending the satellites. So internet is from satellites, where they will make the infrastructure seamlessly available for everybody, which means today even rural areas should have access to internet. If we are talking something like 1000 Gbps speed in the urban locality, but if you go rural, of course we are going to have the same. May not be 1000 Gbps, but it could be at least 200 Gbps or 300 Gbps. Today we are talking about that era where the entire world is going to be connected and network is going to be seamlessly available. So digital is going to be the prime. I will sit here and do my work, or I can work anywhere. Example, Fujitsu and one other organization, if I'm right, I don't know if it's Siemens, they have announced work from anywhere culture.
Fujitsu has announced work from anywhere.
Yeah.
That also reminds me, in terms of a layman to understand what technological skills, you think will be on demand. Something like AI, robotics, RPA, some of the few skills.
So example, so when you AI is not a skill or robotics is not a skill. Now, if it's a technology that you will adapt in your organization, depending on what area you're focusing. Example, if you take example like a software organization, today they are selling technology. Okay, now I'll quote an example, IBM. So they have their cloud infrastructure. Amazon has their cloud infrastructure. Microsoft has this cloud infrastructure. But today with everybody going virtual, one of the biggest selling in demand is cloud infrastructure, because everybody is now this, and moreover, the second most important, there's so much data available in, because of the platforms like Zoom today. You know, they are become a $1 million organization, or they've grown phenomenally in the last 8 months. Why? Because we have adapted to this. Google Meet is coming to existence, Microsoft Teams. We're all on all platforms. We are flexible today. Now, if you look at this, all this is run as a cloud infrastructure. So cloud infrastructure becomes the foundation. So, but then can we also look at how to, now, when we say cloud infrastructure, it has its own challenges too. Now, to run data center is not a joke, okay? One data center requires the entire electricity, which equivalent to a country like Denmark will consume in a month. That is the amount of electricity is required. And today we are in the paucity of electricity. So what is the alternate? Do you have, we want to go sustainable, we are operating in a sustainability environment. So can you look at alternate?
I come back to that question once again, Rajeshri, because Rolls-Royce is a classy example. They don't manufacture. A lot of people don't know. They are the largest manufacturer of gensets in the world.
Gensets is one aspect, where engine manufacturing.
Correct. So I think a lot of people don't know, they don't manufacture car, but it's got a huge brand value. My question to Rohit: Do you think what kind of skills do you think is going to be rampant in the market for us and as an industry to prepare for?
Yes, see, for me, I think the skills of the future are where like we've already said. I mean, today I don't need to repeat what's easily available out there. Anything to do with cloud, analytics, digitization. These are the skills of the future, right? But as Rajeshri said, I think we as HR professionals need to understand that these skills are, and these are every 3-4 years a new skill emerges, a new industry emerges. Like there was a time 20 years ago, Java was the big buzzword. Right? C++ was something like Java was this stylish word. Today that's standard. So there's an evolution going on. So obviously artificial intelligence, anything to do with machine learning, anything to do with cloud infrastructure, those are the skills of the future, and that will be the new ones in demand. But like analytics, okay, analytics is very good. But what's the use of analytics if the person behind that data recipient doesn't have the judgment and decision-making ability? So I think, the cognitive flexibility, negotiation skill, emotional intelligence, all of this also has to, lay on top of those other technical skills which will emerge. Every 2-3 years, you'll see a new technology, new ecosystem emerging, right? And those skills are definitely on, and I've just mentioned a few of those. But those skills are as only good if it has the other aspects, the cultural aspects, which Rajeshri spoke of, loaded on it. So like, I'll just give you an example. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said, I have a great, analytics person. He's got amazing analytics skill, comes from very good, intelligence background and all, but doesn't have good judgment and decision-making ability, right? So all of that skill kind of gets eroded because of that one aspect the individual doesn't have. So I think we have to marry the skills that are constantly evolving and are in demand with something which is always required, which is there we see a gap. But to make a simple response, to shorten it, I think the skills to do with, like, today talking about cloud, talking about infrastructure, talking about blockchain, right? These are the areas where if you are mastering this, I think these are the scenarios of the future. I come from a telecom company, and I know our transition to IoT and blockchain has been very rampant recently. So people who come in with those kind of technologies, those kind of skills are definitely more in demand, and that's what the future for our organization looks like.
I mean, both of you are industry leaders, and I'll continue the question with Rohit at this point of time, then move on to Rajeshri. Because of, as you have rightly said, there has been a lot of technology evolution that's happening every couple of years, or 3 years, or 4 years. What I have seen from a Fox base to now Angular or a UI or a UX, or from a Fox Pro to, yes, there have been evolution, but at any given point of time, for the IT industry to stabilize or to grow, there's always a chance for a reskilling, which has become very essential, or upskilling, which is very essential. So how do you think the market is going to open up, especially within the IT industry, on the reskilling and the upskilling space?
I think that is where the largest opportunity lies, if you ask me today. I mean, again, without naming organizations, I was talking to a very large training, an upskilling organization that specializes only in providing skills. And even the freshers who are coming out today still need to get some kind of, an upskilling towards the most relevant skills. Because if you come out as an engineer, right, if you come out as an MTech, you still have bookish knowledge, you've still done some projects, but there's definitely a need. Like, today, just being a Java or something more vanilla is not enough. You need to have more add-ons to that. So it's about identifying, for me, it's about a generation that needs to identify the direction they want to go in, and they need to constantly keep upskilling themselves and leveraging, programs in the market. I mean, today, this pandemic has taught us so many things. I know because of the pandemic, there were fantastic institutes all over the world that offered free courses, right? I know people have leveraged that. In my own organization. We said, hey guys, we have little budgetary constraints. What do we do? All right, let's leverage these free courses. So it's about the attitude to go leverage those courses. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the upskilling, reskilling space, because of the evolution. I think that's where organizations and people need to leverage that. But let's see what Rajshri has to say.
Yeah, I mean, Rajshri, do you think what is going to be the reskilling or upskilling for the IT industry, because the technology is rampantly changing, as the word used by Rohit. Secondly, in continuation to that question, especially with organizations like Rolls-Royce, which is a very premium brand, is your organization doing some kind of reskilling, upskilling for their existing employees or the new employees who are coming?
Skill development is always a part of every organization's focus, because we are constantly evolving, right? And if you look at skill development, when you say skill itself, we are not just looking at skills from technology skills. We are also looking at soft skills. There are different skills, which is very important and relevant today. That's what the whole point of saying digital transformation doesn't mean, okay, cloud computing. Yeah, those are the skills required from a technical angle. So we need data scientists, we need data analysts, and many different people with different capabilities. Now that is capability building. So the skill itself is a very generic word. So what are you trying to reskill? Are you looking at technology reskilling? Are you looking at a capability building? Or are you looking at soft skill upskilling and helping people to change their attitude, the way they communicate, the way they understand, and because they also have to evolve through the paradigm shift. If they're not going through that journey, then there is a huge gap. So every organization has to look, okay, yeah, we are looking at the transformation. Of course, as part of Rolls-Royce, we have a digital academy focus, which is very much focused on skilling, ensuring that they have come up with courses that's going to help, what is going to be the future of the organization. We're always, there's a huge learning, plan or a roadmap that is laid down, and then everybody has to go through that journey. But it also begins with you. It's not just what your organization does that will enable you in upskilling. You also have to put in your own effort into building your knowledge. And that means you have to go do extra studies, go see what is out there in the world. It is not just within organization. And this is something really wrong. This is what people don't understand. Just I only stick to what is given into my organization is never going to give you that, the perspective of how do you look at things. If you don't have knowledge about what is happening in that technology in different industries and how you could adapt certain concepts and bring value to that job, then there is no way. Skilling is like I said, it's a very broad and a vague terminology, but there is so many different parameters under which you need to be able to put yourself in and grow.
Yeah, I mean, as Rohit also had said, that today the industry, if you look at 6 or 7 or 8 years back, we were looking at an I professional, which one skill, and we were hiring. Today, our organizations are looking at T professional. You have a base and you have a horizontal skills that will actually get aligned with different kind of projects. But how do you think the industry is currently prepared for identifying those talent with T skills, just not the I skills?
Well, I think they need to get prepared. I see there's a huge gap in there because the way of how people hire itself is completely I don't know. It's a vague mechanism that they follow. Every organization follow their own processes. They have defined certain ways. And I'll give you an example with technology, and I'll tell you the challenge that exists. So most of the top IT organizations have adopted AI to filter the resumes. Okay, now that's a huge challenge, the gap in the technology, because see, they will say I'm looking for a partnership role, someone with a partnership experience. So my resume might have a partnership experience. Okay, now if your HR is not doing whoever the person, the sourcing person is not looking deeply into a resume and doing just a ad hoc job just because the AI browsed all these resumes with that search word, the keyword in the search, and then they sent you. Somebody reaches out to me with, I have 20 plus of experience working for IBM, Intel, SAP, and doing my own consulting in emerging technologies. I'm one of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers in all the emerging technologies. Now, given that, they send me a role saying, oh, we found your resume suitable for the role. And you know what? It's 5 years experience. And I said, are you kidding me? Did you even see my profile or see my LinkedIn profile? And are you looking? This is the kind of people that are existing in our world. So there is a misuse of the technology or the tool if you're not putting in proper structure to it. And even the person is taking things for granted because they are not doing their job.
So Rohit, coming back to you. So where do you think, the technology intervention should come in identifying the talent or hiring the talent? What kind of changes do you see from the HR fraternity that are going to come in terms of improving the total, identifying the talent?
So I'll respond in two parts. So first, I'll kind of want to continue where Rajshri left off and say that you can rattle out things like saying machine learning, blockchain, AWS, cloud, cybersecurity. These are all data science. These are words that I don't need to go any further to say these are the new emerging trends and technology. And these are the new areas one should focus on. If I had a junior member from technology background coming out of college today in my family, I'd say, hey, these are the areas you need to look at, right? So, but I'll take it one step further. I think it's about the organization's mindset. What has happened over the last 2 decades because of availability of surplus, organizations have gone into the mindset of we want perfect ready person now. Right? Very few organizations want to invest in let's make ready for the future. Let's take a leap of faith on these people. Like I've had challenges in my organization where I had to go back and say, hey, you know what? Why do you want a person from the market? It's going to take 90 to 120 days to have a person on seat, right? From the day we open this into the market, right? Why not identify people from within who have the capability, spend those 90, 100 days training them, and actually succeeded. We were building an IoT practice. We built a blockchain practice within our organization. And we realized that, today, like in today's day, while automation and digitization is making things easy, it's also becoming very important and crackable, which is why cybersecurity as a skill is really, really emerging. So we had to then form a cybersecurity practice of strengthen it, which was already there, but we did it using our internal people. So that is one, I just wanted to bring one aspect there that's about organizational mindset, people leadership mindset on, okay, how do we do this? Do we have a workforce? Do we have a plan? How do we engage the workforce for this? Second is, you said, how does it help talent, right? How about, so obviously, AI, machine learning, digitization has helped the talent arena a lot, especially in the space of talent acquisition. So while Rajshri gave one example, where clearly, obviously the people leveraging technology also have to be smart and savvy. You just can't only depend on technology to do everything because technology is never going to replace a human. But that said, I was speaking to a friend recently who, and I'll name the company, it's called Qualify. And this is a solution which helps, recruiters who need to reach out to a mass network, do a voice recording and reach out to them saying, hey, I saw your CV. This is what I'm reaching out to you for. If you're interested, respond to this voice message by pressing 1, 2, 3. If you're not interested in the job, you think it doesn't fit you, press 2, press 3. With that kind of an automated solution, what happens is the recruiter clearly knows who I need to go back to, right? I don't have to make individual calls to people, and also knows the interest level. It also then gives the person, like today, recruiters have always come to me saying, Rohit, we're trying to call this candidate. Morning we called him, he's in a meeting. Afternoon we called him, he's in a lunch break. Evening, he's not picking up his phone. But this way, this automated solution has actually helped the candidate. The broadcast has let the recruiter broadcast. The candidate can listen to the voice message at his own time, his or her own time, and then respond. So also an example where it can be very smartly leveraged, and there are many solutions in the market out there.
So can I make a statement which says that technology or leveraging technology can expand the upskilling, talent acquisition, and reskilling of the talent?
Absolutely, by all means, it can expand, but it has to be, like Rajshri said, there have to be set boundaries. There have to be, we have to use technology smartly. And my one submission to organizations is, just because it's the new trend, don't jump into it. See if you need it, right?
So what are the interventions? I mean, because both of you had large organizations, from a talent acquisition point of view. So what are the interventions, some great innovations, that you are doing during pandemic or post-pandemic, which you have thought as a process, and you are bringing in to acquire talent? It could be contract staffing or permanent workers that you are hiring currently. What is that different methodology that you're using currently within your own organizations?
So I let Rajshri talk through the talent acquisition space, because very honestly, an organization like hers is doing it more aggressively than mine. We are a mid-sized product company, and talent TA, which is why when we wanted to go and digitize and automate, we said, where do we need it? Do we need it in the TA space? At least for my organization, no. That was not where the burning platform was. For my organization, it was in the upskilling part. So today, our engineers and employees who are used to classroom training, who are used to, for their certification is going to an institute, spending 15 days, and getting certified. Today, that same group has actually gone through all training and certifications online. And for me, that is the first and most simplest example of digital acceptance. The same person who felt that it's worth it and I will learn only when I go to a classroom, today is doing learning at his or her own speed and from home and online, right? There are virtual instructions. I mean, our entire schooling system, what we couldn't have dreamt for our kids and relatives, till a year ago, today that's happening. Homeschooling was like, we never understood what it is. E-learning, we never understood what it is. It's a massive transition. So on that note, I'll let Rajshri chime in, but those are my thoughts. But
Rajshri, in continuation to what Rolls-Royce is doing as an organization, there's one more question I would like to sync it up so that you can take more time to answer this. Do you think that technologies like machine learning or artificial intelligence will have a significant role in identifying talent and help the talent acquisition, or filtering the kind of identifying talent will become more smoother if we use this kind of leeway, these kind of machine learning or artificial intelligence kind of tools?
I think I started with the challenge of what technology poses, but I think it's very important how do you train it, and this is something I keep calling out, right? It's about defining algorithms, and who's defining algorithm, and an architect or a data scientist or anybody like an independent, we are all individuals who are defining an algorithm. So technology is man-made. Technology is not, it's not the other way around. So I always say human intelligence cannot be replaced with artificial intelligence. But yeah, we are building it in such a way that it would at some point in time perform in a very smart is what we are looking at. No, it has to become smarter. But the challenge lies in if how I think, my thinking process was somebody else's, even it could be a man and a woman, the gender itself, how they think was completely different. And when you're defining an algorithm, it is based on my understanding or my perception that this is how I would think. So I'm defining the algorithm based on my understanding, which is actually wrong, because I'm not looking at 360-degree view or how would anyone else think. If I have to say, if I need to look at a particular resume, or I need that shortlisting done, or they need to go and search the entire LinkedIn to get that kind of resume, there is going to be a huge challenge. And this is for sure, I can guarantee this. And I have experienced when I was in sabbatical. At that time, I said, okay, do I want to join back corporate world, or what do I want to do? Then I just tried, and then I realized no matter, on LinkedIn, if you look at, there are a lot of jobs like the corporate say, oh, there's this job, there's that job, and all that, right? Leadership hiring is always done in a very different capacity. They are not going to publish a lot of roles there. So whatever that is published, there's no response that comes. Why? Because it goes and gets filtered by some software that you have enabled, that like it could, you have already made the AI understand that this is what I'm looking at, whatever. So then there is a huge challenge. So, and I also see that in your resume, then you have to talk all the jargons and all. I think it's a very deeper subject. And if I go talking about it, we will exceed our set limit of time as well. So I'll still say every organization, it's not just Rolls-Royce, right? We all have to do manually, some effort into making sure that it is the right resume. Because if I don't do my homework and I go and talk to some candidate without doing my homework, then it is my failure and not somebody else's. And as a leader, I'm not doing justice to my organization or to my job. And I'm going to quote a very interesting example. I'm not going to name the company or whoever it is, but at some point in time, very, very, very top organization, globally. And I was interviewing with this, very senior leader in that organization. And I was sitting in that interview, telling me that's the worst interview of my life. And I'll also quote with one of the best interviews that I've had as well. He sits into my interview and says, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know where's your resume. I've not even gone through it. Just come to me. Just tell me about yourself. Absolutely disinterested. So you're telling me you like already, I shut my door saying I would never want to work for a person like this or a company like this, which doesn't show seriousness into someone else. And I will say that with my organization, my super boss, her name is Carolyn Gorski. And when she was interviewing me, you wouldn't believe, it was the best interview in 20 years of my career. Because she showed me how much she values me. She made me explain my job, the kind of work that I have done. She was able to bring out those stories from me. Why? Because she asked the right question. She had already gone through my profile. She understood my expertise and she asked the rightest of the questions. She had done her homework. That shows sincerity, and that's a mark of a great leader.
I mean,
an example.
Leaving the emotion side, but let's stick to the technology aspect.
No, the technology itself, I'm clubbing with technology. My point to make this is, technology itself is not going to change anything. I'm talking about there needs to be a human, value add to that. Technology will only give you, okay, when you define the algorithm, it is going to bring out some 10 best CVs. But if you don't do, whatever as a HR resource, sourcing manager, whoever that you are, if you're not going to put in effort to look through that and going in detail, no technology is going to help. Let me be very honest about it.
Absolutely. Rohit, now that since both of you have said in terms of the technology evolution or the new tools or new processes that are going to come, how do you think that this transformation is going to improve productivity of employees?
Right. So again, in my favorite style, I'll answer in two parts. The first part is I'll still continue with your previous question, and I firmly believe that we should and we will leverage technology in the talent acquisition space for especially corporations which hire in very large numbers. It is a definite helping tool. It's a time-saving tool. It is a efficiency tool. But let's remember, it's only the tool and not the end all, right? So organizations have to be smart and cognitive of how to use these tools, and every organization should learn to customize the tool for themselves, right? Just because, like I recall, we use Workday, entire suite of Workday for us. Our TA needs are not very aggressive, which is why we just leverage what Workday gives us. But that said, on the talent transformation side, we can't just leverage what a vendor gives us. We had to build stuff, right? We had to have an automation team work on things. So clearly, is the talent acquisition arena going to embrace technology and advancements of digitization? Is their life going to become easier? 100% yes, without a doubt. But just because your life becomes easy, it doesn't mean you stop being smart, which is coming back to Rajshree's point. And that, I think, is the talent, and I call it the war for talent, because this is the talent in the TA side. Now you ask me, is it going to make people more productive, and is it going to make people more efficient? Yes, the first set of people who will be more productive and efficient are people in the TA's arena. Today, if you look at, an HR space, I mean, today, if you look at within my HR community, is the TA folks who are the most valued, because the organizations are either seeing revival or anticipating revival in the near future. The last 6 to 8 months has been a little bit of a deadlock globally, right? And there are definitely the e-tailers and few organizations that have made the most out of it, one being Zoom itself. But that apart, I think organizations are readying themselves for an uptake. And in this uptake, productivity first will be felt by the talent acquisition arena, and also the experience of the candidate. So Rajshri once quoted a very poor experience that she went through. There are also people who would have got a good experience and a quick response, right, because of this. So the experience of a candidate is going to change. The productivity of the TA individual is going to change. In my mind, keeping just the talent acquisition, in keeping just talent acquisition in mind. Now, if you go to general talent, of course, there's a lot more to talk about, but this is what I'll have to say.
Yeah, I mean, in continuation, Rajeshri, can you also throw some light on this?
See, I shared my best and the worst experience, only to say that technology cannot change everything. I disagree to a lot of aspects of technology, because, yeah, we focus is to increase productivity or efficiency. But I see that sometimes technology itself becomes a bottleneck if you do not know how to customize it, how to rightly use it, and how to integrate it suiting to your needs. Because it is, again, everything is organizational driven. What your organization is using cannot be, same principles cannot be applied to my organization. So all that has to be independently addressed. And if you look at like that, there's a whole load of work to be done in every space. And for that, we need, like, most important word I'll use is, we need to understand the technology in its right capacity. So knowledge plays a very important role. It's not about just skilling. You need to be able to understand it beyond what it means. So that is where today we are missing there's a huge gap.
I'm going to ask a couple of more questions outside the syllabus, than what is agreed. Today, I read in the newspaper or somewhere, one of the leading OTT promoter has said that working remotely will kill creativity. Any thoughts on that?
What working remotely will create?
Will kill creativity.
Will kill creativity. To a certain degree, I will accept. I'll tell you why. To certain aspects, see, there needs to be a balance. I'm not saying working remotely is bad thing. No, you do. But I think if you look at the confinement that we have had, we've never had this confinement in whatever donkey's years that we have been in the industry. So this confinement is very new. So I'm not saying it will kill creativity, but sometimes people see, that's what I said. It's attitude. It's about how driven are you. So if you are not driven yourself, nobody can give this thing from outside, right? And then you can slack and you can fall down easily, because that's a human nature. Now, keeping that in view, that is why I said the policies, how the world is going to engage and address this gap depends on how smartly we are going to have tools and how the working culture is going to slightly change. We are all working in a very chaotic environment. There's no structure right now. Once we bring that structure and once we do all of this, then I would say, yes, we will be able to get through that gap. But yes, creativity can hamper, because you can't keep sitting in whole day calls. It does feel, oh, enough, I just cannot take any more calls, sort of.
Rohit, you want to add to that point on killing?
I'll just chime in a few thoughts. So, see, creativity can be, there are different kinds of creativity, right? There's an artistic creativity. So if you ask a person who writes a novel, a fiction novel, this person is usually finding solitude, going away into the jungle, locking himself in a room, and then writing that novel, because you need to think. Now, there's also another kind of creativity which is is fueled by collaboration, is fueled by interaction. And somewhere, working remotely, working in distance, I know these tools are great, you and me can see each other, but it would be much better to sit across the table and talk to you, and over a cup of coffee. It has a very different feeling, and nothing digital can replace that real life experience. So depends on which level, which kind of creativity we're talking about. There's a certain creativity where just being a remote helps, and there's a certain creativity, like you can never ask a footballer to think of new football jugglery tricks alone in his room. He needs his team to do that. right? So it depends on which kind of creativity we're trying to fuel. And I think, like Rajshri said, I think we all agree that, cabin fever gets to the best of us when we're sitting at home, right? And we need to have a balance of, having the collaborative environment back in our offices to the remote working. But I think on creativity specifically, it depends on which kind of creativity, and, different environments fuel different creativity.
Just to add to what you said, Rohit, it's true. Like, see, when I want to do my research work, I want to sit in that confinement. I don't want to be exposed, right? But for me, as a person who has to meet clients, I like that personal touch. And I'll also tell a very interesting gap. And this is something, when we're talking on the phone, many times people are interpreting, they're not seeing you, right? Sometimes it is not in everybody's capacity to interpret it rightly. They're reading between the lines. They're judging you a lot. And I experienced this with few people, and then they will put back on you saying, oh, you spoke like this, you were rude to me, you did this to me, and this is not ethics and whatever nonsensical. And to me, I see that's highly immatured level of interaction, because people do not seem to understand how to interpret, and they form their own perception based on whether they like you or not like you. There's so many parameters that reflect. So that's another challenge that I find. And the creativity part itself is depending on what you want to create. I mean, like what Rohit very rightly said, to me, it could vary. Like if I'm writing and I want to be creative, I want to just sit in my room. I don't want to get out anywhere. But going and meeting people, because that's a first-hand experience. I am in front of you. You will learn a lot more about me than trying to do over this call, which is a fact of life, and that cannot be replaced.
Well, in continuation, what I was asking outside the syllabus questions, because I was doing one of the with our ad agency, one of the questions the ad agency asked me yesterday is that what are the new initiatives different HRs are taking, in this pandemic, especially organized like Google. They have announced 4-day week from next year. Facebook has announced, 1 year work from home. So what are the new HR initiatives organizations like yours or Rohit are taking, to improve the mood of the employees?
Who should go first? I'll let Rajshri go if she wants to.
See, it's a very interesting topic. Mental health plays I think a vital role. Everybody's talking about mental health, and sometimes I find, oh God, this one thing that I would tell, I have to bring a little my personal spiritual spiel here, because that's what I believe. See, nobody can transform your mind. It's self-effort. You will have to work your way through. Okay, if you want to become somebody fantastic, you want to excel in what you do, you have to first put your effort and make yourself driven and be motivated. Do things that is going to be helpful in both in your professional and personal life. Do things that is going to add to whatever you like. Okay, so the only way to take care of your well-being, the mind, it's something in your hands. Nobody can give it from outside. Yes, organizations are come up with so many different initiatives every day. They try to say, they come up with some interesting things. Today, go feed a bird. Initial days with Rolls-Royce, they came up with a interesting concept. Every day they would say, have you go do this today you sing a song.
From a large policy point of view, are there any significant learnings that you are doing away from the market? Like Google, as I've said, they've announced 4-day week. So like that, any large changes, HR policy practice changes?
I'm not sure what is it going to be in 2021, at least this entire year, we are all working from home. So, and it's quite flexible. An example, we are working flexi hours in the sense, example, I would be my team, though she's based in we are all based in India. We work at a global, global time zone as well. But there's a flexibility. If I need to today, I need to take my mom to the doctor, but I can always let them know and come back work. So there's nothing like, this timing is a thing. As long as you're getting a job, then nobody's questioning you. So that's a trust that they give to their employees, and then Rolls-Royce is very good in that kind of trust. And
Rohit,
yeah. So just to add on to this, so I'll say, just carrying on from where Rajshri left off, trust, we've also made it very flexible. I'll give you an example of my own team member who's a new mother. Due to the pandemic, she obviously had a domestic help, but now there's a fear factor she has to manage. So we've let her take hours to her 8-9 hours, but at her space. And she's worked with me saying, I'll log in at 7 in the morning, little early. I'll finish up some work, but between 10 to 12, I need some personal time. And then once again, when the baby's sleeping, I'll do it. So, and one is about the trust, the flexibility that's there. But what we okay, so have there been some major initiatives? I mean, no, not every, if every organization starts announcing something, then we'll have 2,000 things in 1 week. And, we can't have that. We can have Google and Facebook, and, many of us will then look at that and formulate some ideas for ourselves. So not every organization is out there to announce something new and fresh, but it's about reimagine possibilities of doing the same things. Like for us, we went back to the drawing board. What was important from an HR perspective, an employee experience perspective, was the family connect, collaboration. What was important for managers? It was the first time managers, we know for a fact that more than 50% of the managers, even while being in office, sometimes struggle with team management and collaboration and bringing people together. Now, imagine we're doing that from home. So the first thing we did was, as a conscious effort, we spent the month of March, April, May only in orienting and training managers how to manage work remotely, how to manage teams, how to juggle 3 balls, which is the team, task, individual, and not to let a single ball drop. Because in this environment, it's very easy for the manager to focus on just the task and ignore the other 2.
I'm going to ask this question to both of you, and I want both of you to answer it. With Rohit, since I'll continue with you, how do you think the job market in India is going to be in the next 2 quarters and after that?
So see, I'm not an expert in any measure, but from what I'm reading, from what I'm talking to people, when I talk to partners in the recruiting space, a lot of points, lots of people are talking about things are looking up. Now, let me tell you about our own organization. While on one side, we had to take some difficult decisions, we had to make some reductions, right? On the other hand, we actually saw work from high-cost, locations coming to India. I just spoke about the cybersecurity example. That team was originally slated for 2020 to be in our head office in Tampa, Florida. But then we went back to the drawing board and said, can this work be done from Hyderabad, India? And the answer was yes. That work came here. Likewise, I'm seeing either due to cost pressures, either due to better efficiencies, or just the skill set availability. For multiple factors, I see that India will ride the upward wave after this temporary slowdown. I definitely feel buoyant based on what I am seeing, based on what I am gathering from the marketplace.
And which are the skills you see you see that there will be a surge?
Honestly, I see it across the board. So even it's a basic, Hadoop, Java, C++, from there right up to cybersecurity, blockchain, anything to do with cloud, Internet of Things, analytics, and again, I don't want to repeat what we've already said, but yeah, those future.
Rajesh, if you can answer that from your perspective, that how is the job market going to be in the next 2 quarters, and what's in for organizations like us, which provide contingent workforce?
To be very honest, currently, if you see, everybody is going through the reorg. The reason they are going through the reorg is they want to realign to what is the look like. They're taking a stock check. They're trying to understand what is relevant, where they need to channel, rechannel, and see how the workforce have to be relooked at, right? Yeah. So every organization has taken certain difficult decisions, which is not, they were not, even it was not in their best interest to do that, but situations had forced them. But what I see is that with this brings new opportunities. Definitely the job market is going to grow, and it's going to bring a lot more opportunities. And in terms, at least India becoming an innovation destination will be, India will also be looking at how AI will become a big focus area. In fact, as I built the strategy, even for the organization, I was doing some research, and I see how, as part of PM's office, they are looking at by 2025, India has to be into the #1 in AI adoption in India, and too many other things they are looking at. AI in agri-tech, healthcare, you name it, few others, and power, one of the other focus areas. There's a lot of opportunity. So it is the right time to tap into that. So people should not be disheartened saying, oh, some jobs have gone and what do we do? No, it's going to come back with big bang. I will say that Google has announced to invest 10 billion in India. So that's a huge investment coming in. So which means everybody is restructuring, and things will open up in a big time.
I think we can open this session to our audience, unless both of you want to throw light on something else. I am done with more of my questions. Over to the for the question and answer sessions, and we see what questions are coming.
Sure. So will you moderate the questions? I mean, would you ask?
I will moderate the questions.
Otherwise, I'll have to keep going.
First question that has come is, can you name some technological tools that will help reskilling? Is the first question that has come in.
So, technological tools that will help with reskilling. I mean, see, today it's about the fact that none of the things have changed. Essentially, the only thing that has changed is we are working remotely. We are leveraging either Zoom or Jabber, MS Teams. Those are the various tools, and that is just to create the platform. But organizations that were helping reskilling earlier are still doing it, just that they've digitized reskilling. So I won't. So these are. Let's not confuse a Zoom or an MS Teams with the reskilling tool. It's not a reskilling.
Sorry to interrupt. The full question is this, right? Could you name technological tools that can help reskilling or L&D in this work from home scenario, other than the Zoom calls? How to measure the effectiveness of reskilling with these tools?
So Rashi, why don't you take a crack at it? Since you've understood the question, you take a crack at it.
They're not talking about the Zoom call. That is exactly what they're saying. That they're saying, how can we? What are the other tools that besides the Zoom calls that can help to measure the effectiveness of reskilling? And with these tools, okay, at least I am not quite sure on what are the other tools that the organization or anybody is using. But let me tell you this much: the way I look at reskilling happening is, I personally go. I think everybody opened up, including Harvard to MIT to you name it, have opened up a lot of free courses. And this was the right time to take that opportunity to learn, to upskill. So anybody who's interested, in fact, some of the organizations that I know did some tie-up with the universities abroad, which would then help them get the courses at no charge. And even including as part of Digital Academy, we opened up a lot of courses for everybody to sign up and get skilled. We had a window of some, 2-3 months. And then there was a lot of people who came and signed up. So there are a lot of different initiatives that is available. So tools is just one aspect. Please don't get stuck up with tool. Tool is not the ultimate game changer in all of this. It is the attitude to learn, and it is the attitude even for the leader. The measure is about, you need to see your team member being productive and doing something worthwhile and still bringing value and contributing. If that is missing, that is the measurement that I will take. If I don't see that happening, where you're not learning, you're not keeping up to date, and you're not giving value, then I see that the person is not doing anything in terms of skill building at all. That is the way I would measure.
So, I mean, one of the questions that's come on my WhatsApp is that now with a lot of employees working from home, what will be the role of HRBP?
I think the role of HRBP has gone up. Like, in my mind, I was telling my team. So my team was like, Rohit, what do we do and all that. So in office, we used to use these engagement models. And then let me just share with you, and I would be more than happy to share some interventions. But our ESAT score, our pulse score, which we did a pulse survey in Feb, and we did one more in the month of June, went up 12 to 14 percentage points, right? So in a remote environment, we had some feedback as well, and people. So number one for me, HRBP is the one who engages with an employee, and these are the times when Rashi touched on emotional intelligence, emotional quotient being high, understanding. This is when that true HRBP connect, picking up the phone, getting on a video call, understanding their challenges, understanding whether they have a network at home. There are so many things that have come to us, and the way in which employees have opened up to their HR business partner today, at least in my organization, is unprecedented. Even when we were in the office, it was not so open. Today, the conversation has become more human. Today, the conversation is more real. And thanks to that, the HRBP is able to understand the pulse, understand the challenges, understand the mood of the individual, and then surgically, individual to individual, team to team, drive initiatives, whether it's about engagement initiatives. We actually have one day a month where we ask the employees to bring their family on the call. We only engage with family, and we thank them constantly for letting us bring the office to their house, because we are not working from home anymore, people. I think sometimes the lines are so blurred, we feel we are living in our office, right? So I think that's where that employee engagement, the HRBP role for me is extremely critical, is in fact the pivotal role in this whole model of work remote. is HRBP, and now it has taught us how HRBP should work in a remote model. I mean, but Rajshri, your thoughts?
I mean, there's an interesting question coming in for Rajeshri, especially on how is the job market going to be on the automobile and on the mechanical, and for the mechanical engineers.
Interesting. I'm sure it's all going to, like I said, it's all in the process of transforming, and there are a lot of jobs that is going to open up in more different capacity. It's not the same level or same angle that you all looked at. That's what I'm trying to say. The traditional mindset will change as the organizations re-strategize and reconstruct how they're going to look at their own existing business model. Plus, every organization is going to come up with new business model. So that means there's a huge load of opportunity that will open up, but we have to sit tight and wait for it. Because every organization is doing that. What does 2021 look like? What does 2022 look like? They're strategizing and reworking to get all that in place and to hit the road very soon.
So I think we have any more. I think we don't have any more questions. I think we are ramping up just about 2 minutes ahead of the schedule. I thank Rajeshri. I thank Rohit. Look forward to talk to you offline and take my discussion ahead. Thank you once again for participating in this webinar, and look forward for many more with you guys.
No, thanks. Really pleasure and great to interact, and happy to partner. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.